All right, we're on there. So a couple things really quickly on. Here, I'll recap the calendar because it wasn't recorded. Okay, so today's Tuesday. We're going to cover Chapter 8. Thursday, we're probably going to cover IRB. I'm going to look for it in the book, and if not, I'll come up with something. And the following Tuesday, 1 week from today, we're going to do a final exam review over everything we've covered, so bring your questions that day. Thursday, you guys are going to present, and I'm going to sit and watch your presentations on your project. Now, the next question is, when's the final exam? So the following Monday and Tuesday are December 10th and 11th, I believe. Yeah. So the computer exam will be in the testing center from, well, anytime the testing center is open. So you can take that anytime you want. Monday and Tuesday, Monday or Tuesday of the 10th or 11th. Our exam, I think, is going to be Tuesday. Is that right? Here, I'll look it up. I'm pretty sure that's right. We'll look it up, but I believe it's Tuesday the 11th. And I can't remember if it's from 9 to 11 or 11 to 1. I think it's, I don't know. We'll look it up. I don't want to waste time on that right now, but yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Tuesday. So I'll try to post an announcement about that. But again, the important part is the computer part is Monday and Tuesday for sure in the testing center. Okay? All right. So we are going to talk about Chapter 8, which is going to be basic sampling techniques. Okay? All right. So remind me, I didn't realize this, I think I've said this several times, but the population is what again? Who remembers? This is actually in Chapter 8, but you should know it already. Robert's looking it up. Yes?
Are you asking?
What's the definition of population?
It's the entire group of people.
Yes, the entire set of individuals we want information on. Okay? And your sample is yeah, to subset of your population. Okay. Let's also talk about parameter. Some of this already feels like review and statistic. I probably should have taught, well, I know I taught this to you, but apparently it was in this chapter. I taught it for you because you need to. Okay? What's the parameter? I think we're on a Thanksgiving hangover, aren't we? Forgot everything about this class.
Isn't that like the true statistic of the population?
We don't use statistic because that's here, but yes, it's the true value of the population. A statistic is
article summary of data, and it applies to.
Yes, it applies to samples. It's a numerical summary of data. And I'm going to add a third one on here. It's an estimate of the parameter. Now, is it a good estimate or a bad estimate? That's the big question. That's the $64,000 question. Okay? So, what about, I don't know, I don't know. 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 I Well, let's also talk about bias. Okay, what does bias mean? I've taught that one to you. I think I have.
Favors.
Very
the
good.
side.
You're going to systematically favor certain outcomes. Okay? And so the problem is bias sneaks into every darn sample that we have. Okay? We don't know if our values are too high or too low. Hopefully they're not right. So usually bias is unintentional, although sometimes it can be intentional. Okay? Now, what I want to really get into is sampling techniques. I'm used to teaching this early in the semester. Usually sometimes do it with the old book. We used to teach this on like second day of class. It was actually fun because I felt like it got people, it was kind of fun. Do you guys know what a census is? The statistical
It's like-
definition of census.
Like the decided something, like, or overall, I don't know. I can't remember.
What'd you say?
I've heard the word.
That consensus, where she's talking about the decided decision, whereas a census is a large survey.
It's not just a survey. It's not just a count.
I guess we don't.
Okay? It's where you collect data on every individual in the population. Okay? Now, is it easy to collect information on every American? No. That's why we only do it on election day. And if you don't vote, you don't count. It's still a census. Okay? You had the chance to be counted, and if you didn't, then tough luck. Okay, so typically, censuses are nice to do. They're not always useful, or not always the best, but they often are. And so rather than do a census where we actually sample, not sample, but we collect data on every individual in the population, we will do what we call a simple random sample. I think I gave you guys a question about a random number table I had to give, and then I realized I hadn't taught this chapter. Okay? So this is the lecture that I was supposed to give to you a long time ago. But we're going to do it today. So simple random sample, everyone has an equal chance to be picked. Okay? And often we use a random number table. Now, I should have had to do this before your project. Ideally, simple random samples are usually the best. I'll put often the best. Okay? We've also got a convenience sample. Okay? Which are, just like it sounds, easy to reach individuals. Okay? We'll also talk about a voluntary response sample. Okay? You can think of websites. American Idol, that's my favorite one. Do you guys, am I just too old? Do you guys remember David Archuleta when he was on American Idol?
Yes.
He got robbed. Okay, good. Sometimes you guys are so young, it makes me embarrassed.
I called several times a night for him.
All right. So American Idol, those are good things. The problem is only motivated people vote, okay? And in the case of David Archuleta, he was going up against David, who's the other guy?
Cook.
Cook. Has he done anything?
Nope.
It's like-
Useless.
One good.
So Missouri has a bigger population than Utah, that's why he won. Okay, it's a bunch of crap. Okay, so that's a good example of where we've gotten bias in there. And it's not that anybody did anything wrong, but just all the people from Missouri like David Cook and all the people from Utah like David Archuleta, and we lost because we're smaller. So it wasn't necessarily representative. Now, I will tell you this is a funny story, okay? Ann Landers. Well, does anybody know who Ann Landers is? Dear Abby, has anybody ever heard of Dear Abby? Okay, Ann Landers was Dear Abby's sister. They both were advice columnists back in the day. Ann Landers asked, if you had to do it over again, would you have children? She got 10,000 responses. That's a big sample size, right? Okay. 70% said no. Do you think that poll was biased? Probably, okay? It was a voluntary response sample. Only people who read her thing, and probably people who were having very difficult times with their children, responded.
That doesn't make sense because people keep having children, so they would do it again. Like, just the fact that we keep.
Yeah, so the point is, that's a perfect example of voluntary response sample. It's biased because you're only getting people with strong opinions, people with strong negative opinions. I will tell you what, there was a website that I was reading one time, and they usually only have, 100 or 200 people that respond to their polls. One of their polls asked about circumcision, like should you circumcise your child? And apparently an anti-circumcision website found it and flooded it, and it got like 2,000 votes, and like 90% were like, no, it's horrible. And so that's always the problem with voluntary response samples. So let's talk about a systematic sample. Okay, you select every case individual. You can think of it as pseudo random. Okay, sometimes randomization can be very hard to do. And in fact, maybe I should just mention that really quickly.
It's okay.
Every third individual, every fourth individual, whatever K you want it to be, okay? So if you're sitting in a mall, you just select every fourth person that walks by and say, can I ask you a question, whatever, okay? So the idea here is it's kind of like random, but it's still not random, okay? But let's talk a little bit about simple random sample, okay? In one of my graduate classes, they had talked about how there was this researcher, and he wanted to find out how much lead was in your tuna fish can, because tuna eat lots of things, and lead's one of them. And then we eat the tuna, and we get the lead. Okay. So he asked how you would go about selecting a random or a bunch of random cans of tuna. Okay. Now I know you guys did your poll, and I want to ask you if you were this detailed on randomization. Okay. So here's what he told us we needed to do to find a random can of tuna. He was from the state of Washington. So the first thing he did is he said, okay, I want you to randomly list all the cities in Washington and randomly select a city. Now, one of the problems with that is, since it's random, you might not get Seattle. You probably ought to include Seattle in there, right? Okay. So you list a bunch of cities, you get Seattle, okay? Now, where can you buy tuna fish? Let's pretend it's in Utah. What are some Utah grocery stores? What?
Smith.
Smith's?
Walmart.
What?
Walmart.
Walmart? Macy's? Costco?
The dollar store.
The dollar store?
Tuna.
Yeah.
Ew,
Okay.
that's gross.
Oh, there's not an Albertsons anymore. Fresh Market, you can list them all. Okay, so you randomly click, let's say Seattle, and then you randomly pick, or let's say Spokane. You randomly pick Spokane, and then you randomly pick the store, Walmart, or Albertsons. There's probably an Albertsons up there, or whatever, Safeway. You list them all. Skaggs Alpha Beta. Do you guys remember that store? I used to be in town. Showing my age. Then, what kind of tuna fish is there? Well, let's talk about brand names. You get Chicken of the Sea.
Kirkland.
Kirkland.
Western Family.
Western Family.
Oh, they changed their name. Food.
Starkist.
Oh, what did they?
Right?
Then there's the general, whatever.
So you have to list all the brands of tuna fish that you can get. Okay? Now, did you know that you can get tuna fish in oil or tuna fish in water? You got to randomly select which one you're picking. Is it in oil or is it in water? And then once you're in there, now he's in the store and he goes, okay, I've got a random number generator in my hand here. And then you're going to pick the fourth can from the left or whatever of Starkist oil at, Skaggs Alphabet. Like, did you go through that much detail when you randomly pick people? You didn't, did you? Okay. So do you think you might have a problem with bias in your poll? Maybe. It's hard to know, right? Actually, we are going to be able to tell because you're going to do the election results. And you're going to do, what were you doing?
Not people in Congress or Democrats or Republicans.
Democrats or Republicans, and you're going to compare it to 538's website, right? Okay. All right. So in order to do this, I forgot to mention this, you need what's called a sampling frame. Okay. Now, if we're talking about elections or things like that, that's a list of all individuals. And when I say individuals, okay, in the case of an election, not every individual can vote. You have non-citizens, you have felons. A lot of felons can't vote, things like that, okay? So sampling frame, you need a list of individuals. Now, normally when I do this, I say, I want you to find a bunch of people in the phone book and I want you to randomly pick people out of the phone book. I didn't do that this time, but I will do it next semester. You guys got lucky. Okay, so you could think of your phone book as the sampling frame, okay? Or if you're going to do a really good job, you're going to get a list of registered voters in the state of Utah or whatever, okay? That would be your sampling frame. Now, one of the things that some pollsters do, rather, like I said, simple random sample is typically the best, but a lot of pollsters will do what's called a stratified sample. Okay? In the case of a stratified sample, you divide into groups first, such as income, political party, maybe I'll just put party, gender, thing like that, and then randomly select. Okay, the reason why is because with a true random sample, you might miss poor people, or you might miss the homeless, or you might get too many Democrats or too many Republicans or whatever, okay? And so that's why a lot of the times when you're doing a poll, or when you hear a poll, they'll ask you what's your political party, what's your age, what's your income, because the idea here is we want to make sure we're not getting too many rich people, too many poor people, too many homeless. Usually it's too few though, because you can't find them, and that sort of thing. So we'll do some examples in here. You can also do what's called a cluster sample. Okay? A cluster sample is to select every individual in a cluster. Okay? So for example, let's say because I wanted to do a poll on should UVU increase the number of parking lots on campus. Okay? Now, it might be hard to get a true random sample out of all students. And so what we might do is we might say, well, you know what? There's, let's say, 40 English classes at UVU, probably more than that, but let's say there's 40, okay? You could think of each class as a cluster. And so for ease of data, what I'll do is I'll say, okay, section 3, I'll randomly click, you know, say 5 sections. Section 3, section 10, section 2, section 20, and section 35. Okay? And then those 5 sections that I randomly selected, I will just pass out a survey in class and say, do you think you should have more parking? Or something like that. Okay? So that would be an example of a cluster. Every class is a cluster, and you're talking to everybody in the cluster. So there's still some randomization going on because you're randomly selecting the cluster, but you're talking to everybody within the cluster. Okay? All right, so here's what I would like to do. Just to let us know, we're going to do a quick example. I don't know if I can pause this. I wish I could pause this, but that's all right. Here's what I'd like to do. I want you to count off how many people we have here. We're going to pretend the entire class is here and nobody's off. But I want you to count from 1 to, say, 10 or whatever we get to. And I want you to remember your number.
1,
4,
5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Okay, we've got 10 people. Now, clearly our population is rather small. Okay, so what I'd like to do is we're going to ask a question. The question is going to be, were you happy with the outcome of the BYU-Utah game?
What was it?
Utah won. I
But
shouldn't influence you. No, I'm not trying to, I shouldn't be influencing you, okay? So here's what we're going to do. We're going to, this is such a small class. Where is everybody? Okay, so we're going to do this. We're going to do a clusters of 3 or 4 here, okay? You 3 guys are a cluster because you're sitting together. You 3 girls are a cluster, and then we're going to put you 4 as a cluster, okay? I want you to take about 30 seconds, okay? We're going to do the poll. This is the poll question. Were you happy with the outcome of the BYU-Utah game? Well, this is kind of, in a way, you could think of this as a convenience sample because I'm picking people that are sitting conveniently close to each other, and a cluster sample. Okay, so we're going to record our data here. So amongst you 3, and you 4, we're going to say, yes, I was happy. No, I wasn't happy. We're going to have group 1, 2, and 3. Okay, 30 seconds, no campaigning, just find out amongst your group, yes or no, you were happy with the outcome. Okay. All right, are you done? Okay, hopefully you're done. Okay, group number 1. How many of you 3 were happy?
Yes,
1 was happy, 2 were not happy. Group number 2, you 3.
I think we said no.
All 3 of you were no's? No yeses? Group number 3?
He was no, she was yes. No, we didn't care.
So you like BYU?
1, and don't care. We don't like don't cares. Okay, we'll do this. Okay? All right. So now, if we were to count, okay, so one way to think about this, because we've done this, we just did a census. Okay? The census for people who are happy is basically 2 divided by 10. Okay? So 20% of us were happy. I didn't include myself. I was happy too, but we'll keep these numbers. Okay? Now, so the census, the true value is 20%. Now, if we say the percent yes, okay, then we will say 1 divided by the sum of both of these, okay? So group number 1, you were biased on the high side, okay? Group number 2, you were biased on the low side. And group number 3 was, oh, you know what? I need to fix that. You were actually the least biased. Okay, you were 25%. So you can think of all of these as your sample statistics. We just did a sample. Now, obviously, you'd never do a sample of 3 in real life. Okay, but we're just illustrating a point here. Okay, so we would say this was biased, and that's probably, they're all 3 within the margin of error. But anyway, 25 is probably the closest. This one's the closest to true. What did you say? The margin of error, you guys know how to calculate that. It's going to be ridiculously high.
Wait, what?
Don't you remember how to do that with your confidence interval?
How did you just know then if it was biased or not?
I'm comparing the 25% to the 20%.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? So nobody got a bullseye. Okay?
Where did the census come from?
I just asked everybody in the population. You're the population.
Okay.
The population of this class. Okay? Didn't know we had so many BYU fans in here. That's terrible.
I'm not.
Utah's terrible. What are you saying?
I didn't
Oh,
really care.
rampage.
But like, I'm so sick of all the, they're losing streak is old enough to be baptized. Like, Utah fans are
That
kind
was
of
a
dirty.
great fan.
Like, they say some mean stuff.
Not funny, bro.
I mean, not all of them, but I just found myself.
So let me
cheering
just
for
say
BYU.
this. I'll just say this, okay? I know a guy who was a quarterback at BYU and he transferred to UCLA. Think about it, you might know who I'm talking about. His parents said, I thought BYU fans were bad. No, I thought Utah fans were bad until I found BYU fans. So anyway, they're both bad. I'll just say
Oh,
that.
no, they both are.
They're
Like,
both bad.
they both have their.
But I will say this, I did go to a football game and then you get a lot of UCLA fans and they're like, this bunch of Mormons, we hate them all. So every fan base has bad ones. So anyway, but the point is here, not whether you like BYU or Utah, but I wish that more of you liked Utah, is so we've got some built-in biases based on, you could think of these as cluster. We did the cluster together. You could also think of them as convenient. Now, one of the things that I could do with a stratified sample, you try to divide into groups such that, let's divide our strata into gender. Now we've got 4 guys here and 6 girls here. So one of the things that we could do, can't really do this very well. This class is too small to illustrate this properly. Here's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
We're going to talk to 2 guys and 3 girls, and so that's a bigger sample than we just had. We're going to do a stratified sample, okay? So, okay, so I'm also going, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm also going to do the systematic sample. So I'm going to talk to every second guy. 1, 2, were you happy? No? 1, 2, were you happy? No. Okay. So we got 0 yeses and 2 no's. Okay, these are the guys. Okay, now we're going to talk to 3 girls. So we're going to pick every other girl. 1, 2, are you happy? No. 1, 2, are you happy? You didn't care. 1, 2, are you happy? Oh, so wow, that was terrible. 0 and 3. Okay, so now the idea here was, okay, just because you do a stratified sample, typically these are actually pretty good. Ours was as bad as group 2. We got nobody that was happy with the outcome. Okay, but the idea here is typically you try. Well, I will say it this way. Often you try to get your stratified sample to look like your population. So because we're 40% men, 60% women in here, my sample was 40% men, 60% women. Okay? Now, another thing that we can do is what we call the simple random sample. Here's what we're going to do. We'll still use our 3 groups, okay? But here's what I want you to do, okay? You remember your number, 1 through 10, okay? Now, this was the exercise that I was supposed to show you in the thing. Okay, so I'm going to open up. In your book, you probably have a random number generator, but I've got one here, random numbers, okay?
Is that what the first thing is on the packet?
Yeah, this is my random number
That's what
table right
this
here.
is for?
Yeah, we should have learned this a long time ago, but we're learning it
I've always
today.
wondered.
Yeah. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. Group number 1, you 3 guys, you're going to use line 1. Okay? Group number 2, you're going to use line 2. Group number 3, you're going to use line 3. Now, because we have 10 people here, 10 is a 2-digit number. Well, you know what we could do? Never mind. Here's what we're going to do. If we go 0 through 9, that's 10 digits. Okay, tell you what, you just became 0, okay? You're not 10, you're 0, okay? So now we can use single digits, okay? So your number 0. Now, so what will happen here on line 1, group number 1, here, I'm going to pick this here. Let's pretend I was on line 22, okay? I would pick person number 9, which is Chris, right? Aren't you number 9? Are you happy with the outcome? No. Okay, so then here's what I want you to do. I want you to get in your groups of 3 or 4. I want you to use whatever line you are, and I want you to ask 4 people if they were happy with the outcome, and then we're going to do our results. So we're going to take about no more than 2 minutes, and we're going to do this.
So like we asked number 1, number 4, number 5, number 2.
So line 1 does group 1, or group 1 does line 1, group 2 does line 2, group 3 does line 3. Okay? I want you to ask 4 people, were you happy with the outcome of the game? Yes or no? So group line 1, you're going to pick the first person, you're going to pick the 4th person, and the 5th, and the 2nd person.
Okay, so we go.
Now don't pick, so like in this case, we've got 2 2s in a row, don't pick the same person twice. Skip that, if it's a repeat, skip it. Okay? We're also going to do another exercise in just a minute. So go ahead and take no more than 2 minutes and do your poll. So walk around if you have to and ask people.
So I'm on row 2, so I'm asking number 9.
What's your
No!
I'm 6, right?
No.
No.
He's 2.
No.
He said no.
Who's 3? We go out.
Gentry is.
I'm Gentry.
Yes.
No.
Who's 6? Me. Will you? No. Who's 1?
Wait, who's 5?
Me.
Oh, you're no, right?
With Robert, you're 1?
Yeah,
What are you?
no.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, no.
You said no.
I think everyone was a no.
Who's the other? You're my friend.
All right, are you guys done?
I'm not a BYU fan.
Me neither.
I really don't like
All right, so group number 1, did you ask your 4 people?
Yes.
How many said yes?
1.
1, and so 3 said no? Look at that, 25%. See how much better that was than the first time you did this? How about group number 2? How many people said yes? None?
Yeah.
You're biased. So 4 said no? Group number 3, how many people said yes? 0? Out of 4, really? All right, well, typically, here's what I will say. Typically, the stratified sample and the simple random sample will help you. But as you can see, only one, the randomization helped one group, but it didn't help the others. Okay? So nothing is perfect. Okay? Now, here's what I would like to do. Now, let me ask you this question. Let's pretend for a moment we had 20 people in this class instead of 10. Okay? How would you use this random number table if we had 20 people? No, actually it would be different.
You'd use like 14, 5.
You'd use 2 digits in a row instead of 1. So let's do this again. Let's pretend there are 20 people in this class, okay? So you're 1 through 10, and then 11 through 20. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's do this again. This time we're going to start with lines 11, 12, and 13. Okay. And I want you to do the same thing. In this case, you're going to have 2 numbers, so you're going to impersonate 2 people, basically. Okay. I want you to do the same thing. Now, let's pretend I was on line 20. So I would pick number 14 first. 25 doesn't exist. Then I would pick number 1, and then I would pick number 17, and then I would pick number 20. Does that make sense? If it doesn't exist, you just skip it and go to the next 2 sets of numbers, okay? So let's do this one more time, especially because we have time to do it. And then make sure you know what you're doing, okay? So we're going to do the same thing again. Should we keep it at 4? Yeah, we'll keep it at 4. But you may get asked twice, okay? We're just simulating here, okay? So go ahead. So group 1 is using lines 11, 12, and 13, okay? Go ahead and do it again.
What number are we now?
Your group 3, so you're using row 13.
No, I'm.
13, 12, and 11.
I'm 1 and 11.
No, you're number 16. Who's number 3, Gentry?
I'm 3.
I am 16. Yeah, I am. You're 16.
Who's 6?
Who's 18? She says.
So next we need.
Who's 14? 14?
Who's
Yes.
0?
You already know my answer.
We need 0.
Who's 16?
You skip 0.
After.
She is. No, she is.
Sorry.
She's no.
We did 0 again.
We don't have a 0 now because we put him back at 10.
Oh. Well, we're still counting that stuff.
Jordan's.
So he's a no. 6.
Thank you.
He's a no. Okay.
Oh, it's good.
30, 65, 41, 68, 70, 96, 61, 44, 15. And it's no.
I'm 15.
Yes, you're a no.
I said,
Yeah.
you remembered.
But it's 15.
No, almost everybody's no. What? It's not all red. I'm also wearing blue. Mostly blue.
Okay, so are you done? Let's do our results, see if it's any better. Okay, group number 1, how many yeses did you get?
0.
0 out of 4. Group number 2, how many yeses did you get?
1 yes, 3 no.
3 no's. That was still your best effort yet. Group number 3, how many yeses did you get? 1. Oh, see, it worked better this
Our
time.
best effort.
Okay? So see, yeah, so typically your simple random sample is going to be least biased. And that's what we found this time. Okay? All right. So, I think that's it. Okay, so as far as homework,
Are you calculating?
1 out of 4. I'm definitely having a hangover from
I say
Thanksgiving.
we call class right now.
Okay, I think that other people are confused too though, but how did you calculate this census?
How did I calculate the census? I asked everybody in the room, who did you like?
But then, what did you do to get the point 2?
Okay, so 2 yeses out of 10 people,
Okay, but why are we only doing the yeses?
because that was the simplest calculation.
Okay,
I could have done the no's. I could have done the don't cares.
I know we would have had.
But nobody cares about the don't cares.
I know we would have had.
Somebody's biased.
Right?
What'd you say?
Then we would have had a different census. We did the no.
Yeah, if we did, yeah, well, yeah.
So how do you know which is the right answer on the test?
Well, I said, the question was, were you happy with the outcome, yes or no? And I counted the yeses. I could have counted the no's, but since I said yeses, I stuck with yeses. Do the whole thing.
So you can choose whichever one you want.
You're the person, you can choose whatever you want.
We can do whatever we want. Okay.
Yeah, but I'll probably tell you what I want you to do. Okay? All right, so we're done a little bit early. You've got about 15 minutes left. So the homework is going to be chapter 8. The quiz will be chapter 8 on Thursday. And then we'll probably talk about IRB stuff, which we should have done.
You did make a final review, or you're going to make a final review? That's my question.
So a good final review, that's a good question. What do you think would be good to study for the final
Your
exam?
quizzes and your homework.
My quizzes is the homework and the tests
But
would
I'm
be
wondering
the
if you're gonna
top of the
lay
list.
out, like, what we're
Yeah,
supposed to
And
know.
if you do that, could you do that before our review in class, that way we know what questions we have?
Do what?
Like, if you make a review sheet, like of specific things, that way we can like look at it before we come to class for the due day. That way we know specifically. Like,
So I'll see what I can
have
do.
some quizzes that you
Thursday and Friday, I'll have more time than Wednesday. So it might be next week, but I'll see. All right, so see you all on Thursday.
Next our review day is Tuesday.
Reviews on Tuesday.
So if we can have a review sheet before Tuesday.
Well, let me ask you this. Would you rather the presentations were Tuesday and the review was Thursday, or vice versa?
Vice versa.
The way I had it the first time?
But when's our test? Saturday.
I think so.
The test, the
Monday.
final exam is the following Monday. So do you want the review right before the final or the
Yeah,
Tuesday before the final? So you want your presentations due on Tuesday?
Yeah.
Is that what you want to do? We can do that.
So can we have a
Okay,
review sheet by
so I
Thursday?
just changed everything. Hopefully people are still watching. So the presentations will be due Monday, your PowerPoint will be due Monday night at midnight. And then we can just load them up here and you'll do your presentations on Tuesday. We will do our review on Thursday.
So hopefully we can have a review sheet by Thursday. And we
Hopefully.
can look over it before. Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
All right. So ignore what I said at the beginning of the video.